Hello and welcome to the Winchester Archives Supernatural Podcast. I'm Ed,
Hi, Brooke.
and today we'll be discussing Season 2, Episode 8, Crossroad Blue. But before we do, as always, quick spoiler warning. We will be discussing and connecting dots from across the entire series. So if this is your first time watching Supernatural, or you have not finished the series yet, consider this your heads up. We will be spoiling pretty much everything all the time. So heads up for that. Also, an explicit content warning. We are adults talking about an adult show that deal with dark and sensitive topics. So please expect adult language, mature discussion, and dark humor. You can also find us on Upscrolled and Winchester at Winchester Archives Pod, as well as YouTube, Patreon, and TikTok. We are on all the things again. So please like, share, comment, subscribe, all the fun things to keep us help growing that community of archivists. I always do that, but keep expanding us as well, because we've noticed. We just got a notification on Spotify a couple days ago that we posted on social media. We got 500 downloads, which is exciting. And then yesterday, out of nowhere, we got 1,000. So you guys
Yeah.
are doing a great job. Thank you for liking the content, for sharing it around, for telling us some people about it, because apparently it's working. Because some website recommended us somewhere and exploded out of nowhere. So keep that up. We
Mhm.
appreciate it.
Yes, that is so exciting. I was
Yes.
so confused when I saw the notification. I was like, "Wait a minute."
We're like, this has to be a bug, right? Like, we
Mhm.
just got excited about a 500. Now we're at
Yes.
1,000 in the span of 3 days.
Yes.
So thank you.
Mm. But because of those, like, downloads and plays that we're getting, I wanted to do some Patreon updates. So, previously, we had 4 tiers, and for momentarily time being, I decided to reduce it down to just the $5 a month tier because the higher tiers, first of all, were about like getting digital art, and our artists really needed to take a break. It's been a while since they've made some art for us. So if that perk's not happening, that tier doesn't need to be around. And
Mhm.
then the $10 a month one was about bonus episodes, which we have never made. We might have the time and energy one day, but right now we don't. So I just put it at the $5 a month, which is just to support us. You'll get Discord access. You can talk to us all the time and see what we put on Patreon. Just for now, I saw the spike in people and I was like, I really don't want somebody to subscribe to a tier we can't promise at
Yeah.
the moment.
Yeah. And we
So,
appreciate you guys' understanding with everything. Like I said, with us having a baby on the way, on top of career changes and all this fun stuff, our lives have been very hectic lately. So we
mhm,
appreciate your understanding with all of that. And yeah, so if you guys want to support us, we have that there for you as an option. Otherwise,
mhm.
just keep doing what you're doing, keep listening, just keep sharing us around. We appreciate it. We just have fun chatting with you guys about Supernatural and
Yes,
the folklore behind it.
which I promised we would do in our Discord server if you join it. We're not those creators that are never around. If
Oh,
somebody talks, we will be talking back.
yes, we have Discord open like constantly. So
Yes. But yeah, with that, are we ready to get into the episode?
yeah, I think we're ready to go in. This one's exciting for me because there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, there's so much for you. All right. So this episode aired on November 16th, 2006. It was written by Sarah Gamble, directed by Steve Boyum, and the supporting cast is LaMonde Bird as Robert Johnson. For our synopsis, I have a highly successful man dies after claiming to see and hear dogs that no one else can see or hear. Sam and Dean drive down to Mississippi to check it out. While they are there, they find out people keep frequenting a bar that's located on a crossroads where a demon can be summoned to make deals in exchange for their souls. So now the brothers are trying to figure out how to stop the chain of deaths in the area for the people who keep making those deals.
Seems like a very good synopsis.
Yes, I thought so. I was proud of that. All right, so now on to our episode overview. We start out the whole episode in Greenwood, Mississippi in the year 1938. There's a man sitting on the stage playing a guitar who is Robert Johnson. and the crowd, they're loving it. And he starts hearing dogs howling. So, he's, like, playing, and then he stops, and then he'll start playing and stopping. And then he starts seeing their shadows and then starts seeing the barking, that seemingly no one else around can hear this. They're just like, "Why is he not playing?" But he just runs outside. The dogs are following him, though. He gets into a building, locks the door, and just, I guess just kinda hopes the dogs won't get in, even though it's just like a board wooden door.
Mhm. And they are
Eh
pounded on it.
Yes. Then we see people from the bar come in, and Robert is seizing on the floor, and he tells them black dogs came after him.
Mhm. Which is a very, interesting way to start it off as, like, such a far back
Mhm.
event, but it was a neat way to look at it, I thought.
Yes.
And also, I think it was cool because, this is just, like, a random aside, just because of, like, the history behind everything that's going on, like, it all makes sense and all comes full circle very easily.
Yes.
But I like the way they started out 'cause it's like, "Ooh, that's interesting."
Yes, it is, and the actor who plays Robert, I was listening to an interview with him, and he said when his agent sent this to him, he's like, "This is a job for me," because he loved Robert Johnson, he loved blues,
Mhm.
and he was like, "This is my role," and I'm like, "That's awesome
Yeah, that
that
is
you're able to
awesome.
do that."
And I do think it's cool too because they tied that story into this episode too, which we'll get into again later. But I
Mhm.
also think it's cool, like, that the way they portrayed it, I thought was really cool too, just because
Yeah.
it fit in with, like, the times and stuff like that too, which I thought was cool. Because a lot of the stuff
Yes.
does originate from around those times and from, um, like, freed slave, like, hoodoo and stuff like that comes
Mhm.
from those traditions and from those belief systems of the slaves and things like
Yeah,
that.
that's true. Um, and something else just to point out that's super cool is throughout this whole episode, we, the audience, also never see the dogs.
Mhm. Well, I
Uh,
love that. I'm glad that they're
yeah.
invisible the whole
Mhm.
time.
I think there is an episode where we do see them, but maybe not. But I'm thinking maybe there is. But I guess we'll find out eventually.
I feel like later down the road, maybe, but
Mhm.
as we get more involved with all the demon soul transferring stuff.
Yes, exactly. All right. So after we see this opening screen, we are now in present day. The brothers are at a diner, first discussing how Dean is still a wanted criminal and Sam is not on the radar for the FBI at all.
Which is bizarre. Like, you would Sam has to be still, like, on a list because, like, he literally ran from the cops. Like, where did that charge
And then, like, being a known accomplice.
to, like, a murderer, the fleeing state lines?
Yes.
Hmm,
Well, oh well.
yeah.
Sam is not on their radar. And Sam mentions a case because a man jumped off a building after reporting a black dog following him around. And no one was able to find this black dog. And they're confused on how this dog would have even gotten past the doorman to this very prestigious building.
Yeah.
Then Sam gives us a very brief overview of black dogs. And he says the lore is vague and they're either spirit animals or death omens. And whatever they are, they're big and nasty. To which Dean says, "Yeah, but they could hump the hell out of your leg." Sure.
I mean, he's not wrong, but it's like, that's such a strange place for your brain to go to.
Yes, it is. And then he holds up a photo of a black dog, point at it and be like, "See what I mean?" But the title I thought was interesting. It says Black Dogs, Legends, Myths, History, Tyr, and Fenrir, Norse Mythology. So, with that little brief overview, do you want to tell us the actual lore?
Yeah, and, Sam and Dean are fairly correct in all of these assessments. I do think that these dogs could hump the hell out of your leg. Uh, but, in general, yes, the black dog folklore is very common and very popular, especially around Europe and the Americas. And it originally, came from England, usually is, like, where people tend to originate this from. And they are described as being large and having glowing red or yellow eyes, these dogs, and are generally connected with either the devil or seen as like omens of death, just like Sam described in the episode. There are some very like more obscure ones, kind of that are more about them being like these spirit animals and being like more of like protectors than negative, but generally it's
Mhm,
considered to be a negative thing if you see a big black dog. They aren't invisible, from what I didn't come up with any ones that say the hellhounds are invisible or big black dogs are invisible.
mhm.
They're usually seen because that's how they're big and black dogs. But they are also, just like in this episode, generally connected to Crossroad, which I found neat. One theory of how this association came about was because of myths like the Norse myth of Garmir or the Greek Cerberus, and the fact that
Mm,
dogs can be found are found as like scavengers, especially like smaller dogs. Because so they would be seen around dead things commonly. So they ended up being associated with a bad omen. You see this big
mhm,
black dog roaming around the countryside. It's like a small villager in like, England. That's a threat.
mhm,
That's a big scary threat because it's usually like if it's a big black dog, it's usually described as like a wolf size, like a big dog.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, usually described as a bad omen because they're dangerous. One of the more popular ones is one you probably heard of called Black Shuck, who is a very large black dog who is said to have attacked a church in Bungay in 1577, where two
Oh,
people were killed. And then he also appeared in the nearby village of Blithburg, killing three of them and leaving a claw mark on the church the same day,
oh,
which made him get much more of like a mythological, like ghosty kind of presence,
mhm.
right? Because he apparently attacked two towns in the same day that were like miles apart, which probably was just two big black dogs separately. But who knows? Also, according to the legends, though, for Black Shuck at least, if you examine the spot where you see Old Shuck, you can find scorch marks or the smell of brimstone, which are very common things, as we've discussed before, of demonic presences or like hell.
Mm,
Is described as having the scent of brimstone and sulfur, which again ties it all together to this to being like a hellhound is like a pet of a demon, basically, or like
yes.
a attack dog of a demon.
I've heard in, like, Norse mythology that their goddess Hel has hellhounds,
Yeah,
which
and
would
we'll
make
get into that a little
sense.
bit later when we talk about Crossroads specifically. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
no, you're right. They do have hellhounds as pets there, and then also the tri-faced goddess Hecate, from the Greek myths. Hecate also is said to have hellhounds as well, and she's a crossroads deity.
Okay.
So yeah, it all ties together. It's really this episode I'm very impressed with. It's one of those
Mhm.
episodes where like even though in the episode they don't go into a ton of details, the actual lore behind this whole episode is very well done, which we'll get into
Okay.
again as we keep going. But yeah, that's the idea of the black dog haunting people is kind of like a death omen, a bad thing in myth.
Well, just know I rank my monster lore before I even know your research. I
Yeah.
just base it purely off of what I see on the screen.
Yeah, and that's how I do it with the all the, like, director stuff. I always do it
Yeah.
blind based on what I'm seeing and how I'm feeling in the moment, and then you can correct me on how, like, "Oh, I didn't notice this cool scene transition," or, like,
Mhm.
"This cool effect they did," like, I don't know that stuff, and it adds a layer of cool. But yeah, that's why
Yeah.
the ratings are fun.
True.
We get to learn from each other too.
Mm, that's fair. I like it. But yeah, so now they go to the home of Sean Boyd's business partner pretending to be journalists. They're saying they're writing a tribute, and his partner laughs, saying that Sean always got the tributes. He explains this guy was not a good architect at all. He was just working at a bar called Lloyd's 10 years ago, and overnight he got a big client and was designing amazing buildings. Then they went to an animal shelter to ask for any complaints about black dogs, and they've had 19 calls this week. So they're going door to door to follow up on the call. Right now, they're looking to talk to Dr. Sylvia Perlman.
Which I
Per
thought it was, very funny 'cause, they had some good banter moments on this point, at this episode in general, had some pretty good banter. But I love Dean's comment of, "I swear if this is like another poodle," or whatever he said. It was like Pomeranian or poodle or something. But he's just like
Yes.
complaining that like probably the leads before were not very fruitful.
Yes. And I didn't write this down, but I should have because looking it up, the general internet likes this. When they get when Dean gets back in the car from the shelter, the receptionist wrote her phone number and like a MySpace
Mm-hmm.
URL on it.
Mm-hmm.
And Dean is like, "What's MySpace? Is that like that has to be a porn site?"
Yeah, he like got all excited. He's like, "Oh, is that a porn site?" Even though like Sam obviously knows what MySpace is. 'Cause he was in college at the
Yes.
time, and he's just like looking at him like, "What?"
Yeah, that was I didn't write that down because I was like, "That's such a weird thing to put in this episode," but you know what? We talked
It
about the dog leg, so
Yeah. No, Dean was on a weird one today, but on this episode, but I found it amusing just because like in that weird like charming way that Dean has of like him just being like kind of a lovable idiot,
yes,
and I just like love him for it.
yes, exactly. It's
Like
nice.
he's such a clown, but he's just amazing.
Yep, so, they're hoping it's not a Pomeranian this time.
Mhm.
So, Doctor Perlman's maid opens the door and says she just packed up and left and didn't say where she was going. She asked if the dog was found, which it hasn't been, according to
Mhm.
the brothers. And they asked her if she ever saw it, and she said no, and she never even heard it.
Dun dun dun.
Now we find out that Dr. Perlman is chief surgeon at a hospital, and she got that position 10 years ago, and she's like 43, so she got it at like 33, so being
Mhm.
the youngest person to hold that position in the US. And there's a picture of her and her friends at Lloyd's Bar. So you're
Ah,
starting to put it
True Life.
together. Lloyd's Bar is
Mhm.
a problem. Now we see Dr. Perlman in a motel room just, like, panicking, and the funniest camera work I've ever seen in my life happens here. Someone is pounding on the door, and the camera very clunkily zooms in on the doorknob, the knob. Somebody's knocking,
Mhm.
and they weren't even trying to open the door. It's like a dun, 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 and it, like, moves that fast, like, it's
Yeah.
clunky to the doorknob, and I'm like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
Because this isn't the only time they do that in this episode.
Mhm.
It was probably the same footage used again,
Yeah.
and it's just like, "But why?"
Yeah.
Anyway, she opens the door, and the person knocking is the person in charge of the motel saying she needs to pay or leave. But when she turns to give him the money, his face, like, distorts all
Mhm.
weird, so she throws the cash and shuts the door.
The whole face distortion thing I found really weird. That was like
Mhm.
the part of this that just didn't fit to me.
No. It was
Like,
just
even in, like, lore and stuff, there's nothing that, like, would associate any of this with distorted faces. I really like, all it reminded me of was, like, those old school, like, Snapchat filters that just,
Mhm.
like, did that to your face, and I'm just like, did they just, like, get excited about this new technology that just came out for, like, Snapchat, and they're like, "Let's put this in the show, it's gonna look so creepy."
Snapchat
Like,
wasn't even out then. This
you
was
get my point, though, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
did they just, like, figure out they could do that, and they're like, "That'd be cool to throw in here," because, like, it doesn't make sense to me at all.
No, it doesn't, but I will say the second time this happens, when we get to it, we'll know, but that one was actually like a jump scare. This one
Yes.
wasn't very scary, but the second one is.
I agree with that completely. The second time it happened, I was like, "Ooh, don't like that." But, like, the first time it happened, I saw it, I was like, "What the hell?
Yes.
Like, what are we doing?" Like, what would be the cause of this? They're not cursed. They're not there's no magic happening. That person's not possessed. The demon's not even going after them themselves. It's the dog. It's just going to, like, kill them and take their soul.
Maybe
So,
it's
like
a sign the dogs are near?
but that's a weird omen that I've never like I said, from a lore perspective, at least not from my awareness, if anyone is aware of how this makes sense, please tell me in the comments because I couldn't figure out a way. that this made sense as to why that
Yeah.
happened
I think
ever.
in general, I think it's just an extra horror element.
Yeah, that's what they just wanted to add, like, something else spooky to this scene without making it like a dog growling behind the dude or something. But
Yeah.
I feel like that would've made it better. I feel like if they just made the dog go right behind the dude as she turns to give him the money, then she throws the money and slams the door, I think that would've been perfect. We
I
don't need this
will
weird face distortion thing.
I will say in this first moment, I thought maybe the landlord was actually the demon, and then when it happened the second time, I was like, "Oh, that's not what's happening."
Yeah, I thought so as well, but then once he gave him the money and, like, closed the door and everything was fine, I was like,
Yeah.
"What was the point of that?"
Yeah. Filling space.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But, the brothers have put together just like we have that Lloyd's bar is a problem.
Mhm.
So, they go there, and they see a lot of the same yellow flowers, and Dean thinks it's weird. They're yarrow flowers, and they're used for summoning rituals. Then they figure out by taking a look at the landscape that the bar is placed on a crossroads, and in the middle of it, they just start digging, and they dig out a ritual box, which I would never suggest doing. And then not only do they take it out, they open it and start looking at the ingredients, which I would never, suggest doing either.
Yeah,
But they're like, "Hey, there's black cat bones." How would they know the color of the cat? They wouldn't. It was just bones
yeah,
and dirt, but they're like, "I bet you this is graveyard dirt." And then Dean says, "This has gotta be deep South voodoo stuff," which we know Dean is not very educated
yeah.
in this. And then Dean says crossroads aren't for just summoning one thing, it's where pacts are made. So then Sam says they're not seeing black dogs, they're seeing hellhounds and says they are demonic pit bulls.
Yeah, I think that would be an apt description. Hellhounds tend to be ferocious.
Mhm,
Like, again, linking him back to, like, Cerberus and things like that. Cerberus was the guardian of, like, the underworld in Greek myth, so it's like, yeah, the dogs tend to be,
mhm,
like, kinda brutal. But what they said here as well, crossroads being important places, is a very common thing in folklore. It goes all the way back to ancient Greece, with Hecate and Hermes. Like I
Oh.
said before, Hecate is a three-faced goddess, with each of her faces eventually corresponded to each of the roads of the crossroads. Was one of the thinking behind this.
Mhm,
So that's where a lot of her offerings were left during full moons, as well as for Hermes. Hermes was the messenger god, meaning, and where do messengers go? The roads to deliver messages across the different cities. So
mhm,
they are very familiar with crossroads. Um, so because of that, that was also important for messengers and for Hermes. So this is already like a very holy place at Crossroads.
mhm,
Um, Agate, again, like I said before, was also associated with dogs, and those dogs were said to accompany her and were later to be lost souls that roamed around with her, which also fits into this whole hellhound being connected to Crossroads thing.
mhm.
So that all makes sense. And then as we get into this as well, uh, just a random aside, yarrow flowers are used in ritual, but not really in summoning rituals from what I could tell. It's mostly used as like a protective thing, which I guess would be used in the summoning then because, you want to have protection. So
Mhm.
yarrow flowers are good for that.
Okay.
But when he says it's deep south voodoo stuff, he's correct. A lot of especially the summoning box, which again, I will get into here in a little bit because I go into more details later about that.
Mhm.
But this is eventually when the enslaved Africans were brought to the U.S. They brought with them some of their belief systems, obviously,
Mhm.
and then those, as they were like stamped out ruthlessly by the Christian slave owners, some of those traditions were preserved regardless in African traditions, even as they melded with the traditions of the U.S. as well. And that combination there made conjure and hoodoo and like those kind of
Mhm.
practices. And then one of the ideas from hoodoo practice as well is the idea of a trickster god inhabiting the crossroads, as well as spirits being in those in liminal spaces, because that's what a crossroad is, the liminal space between settlements, right?
Mhm.
Um, so that is like a place where spirits can get lost or spirits kind of travel when they are lost. And then that eventually evolved into being able to sell your soul for various skills at the crossroads.
Okay.
And that's kind of where that tradition comes from, is more of like a southern tradition there.
So now we see Dr. Perlman again, and the weird zoom in on her motel door happens again because the dogs are scratching at it. And then the invisible dog breaks through the window and gets her.
Yep. And just to throw it out there as well, it'd be more like Papa Legba was like the god that was believed in like hoodoo and voodoo
Mhm.
to be at the crossroads.
Okay. Much different than a demon.
Yeah. Still said that you can do a similar thing with him though, is from my understanding,
Mhm.
is like you can still make like pacts and things like that with him at the
Yeah,
crossroads.
makes sense.
And then eventually that also turned into like the devil himself is at the
Yeah.
crossroads. So that's why like Devil Went Down to Georgia. It's like a song.
Mhm. Makes sense. So now we have another flashback to Rosedale, Mississippi in 1930. I'm going to say I don't know why we started out in Greenwood, where the bar is, and now we're in Rosedale, where the bar is, unless the bar wasn't there and this is a different crossroads. Maybe they got the names wrong of the cities. I don't know. But we're 8 years earlier in 1930. We see Robert from the beginning making his deal. So he buries his spell bag, a demon appears, and he asks to be the best blues player. Although I will say, in his case, the demon was just like cool and kissed him because that's how they sealed the terms. But she didn't tell him what giving him these powers meant. She
Mhm.
didn't say anything. So how was he
Mhm.
supposed to know that in 8, not 10 years, he was going to die?
Good question. Maybe they refined their practices over time.
Yes, they would have to. I mean, I guess they don't have to because they're demons, but, like,
Yeah.
you know, they wanna be good business people.
Yeah, they tend to be more lawyery in this series, which I like.
Yeah,
Where they're
me
like,
too.
"Oh, no, well, we're bound by the rules of this thing," and then it's a big deal when they break the rules later in the series.
Yes. Yes. They're very contract heavy.
Yeah, which I love that. I think that's a cool idea for villains.
So now Sam is telling Dean that this is the Robert Johnson legend, for selling your soul at the crossroads. Dean says it's not a legend because they know his music, and Sam doesn't really know his music. So Dean starts say there's like occult references in all of his songs, and then list out some songs that are called Crossroad Blues, name of the episode, Hellhounds on My Trail, Me and the Devil Blues, etc. Then Dean says he died by choking on his own blood and muttering about big evil dogs, which we saw in the beginning.
Yeah, and, the legend itself is correct in these terms. Basically, the legend is that, he's, like, the main example of someone selling their soul to the devil at a crossroads. But obviously since then, the family of Robert Johnson has come out to say that that was not the case, and he was talented due not due to selling his soul, but rather by being trained under Ike Zimmerman, who was like a famous musician at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, this trope also again brings up like the idea in music. Like that's why I said like Devil Went Down to Georgia is a great example because it's basically the same thing. You meet
Mhm.
the devil in Georgia in a crossroads and says I'm a better fiddler than you or whatever. You
Mhm.
beat them in a fiddling contest or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's one of those things that this is a very common thing. I don't know the validity of him dying choking on his own blood about evil dogs. I didn't look into that part, but I just assume that's not correct, just like the rest of the legend of him, like, selling his soul to the devil. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe he did do that, but according to the family, it was because he's actually, like, talented and was trained well, which
Yes.
is more reasonable, at least.
Hey, talented people can't just be talented. They have to sell their souls to be talented.
Exactly.
All right. So Sam says they need to find out who else made deals since a demon is collecting. And Dean says they shouldn't have to clean up people's messes because they voluntarily did this. And I personally normally think I would be agreeing with Dean, but only if they were told the terms of said deal.
Yeah.
Because if they weren't, then it's not a fair deal. But
Hmm.
we're also dealing with demons, so, like, you can't really suspect it would be fair.
Yeah. I agree with that completely. Like, I think if you made the deal, you made the deal kind of thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, only if you know the terms, only if you know exactly how it's gonna work out like that.
Yes, exactly. And Dean says to summon a demon, you have to place your photo of yourself in the ritual box, and he shows Sam a photo of a man named George Darrow. They are trying to find where he lives because he's a Lloyd's regular.
Uh-huh.
They find his apartment and immediately see what they think is pepper under the door.
Uh-huh.
And when George opens the door, Dean says, when you want to keep something evil out, you put salt under the door, not pepper.
And I think it's funny because he initially is just like, "Hey, you grabbed the wrong condiment, like the wrong
Yeah.
shaker." I was like, "That's funny."
George pretends to not know what they're talking about, but, he eventually relents and lets them come in to talk, and he says they got 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Sam asks what is actually under the door, and George says it's goofer dust, which our brothers have never heard of before. George says it's hoodoo, and his grandma taught him it keeps demons out.
Yeah, and Goover dust is a real thing. I was really pleasantly surprised. I used to work at a metaphysical shop, and so I've heard of Goofer dust before. But Goofer
Mhm.
dust is a real thing in hoodoo and magic, and is traditionally used as like a hexing material. And with its roots coming from the Congo region of Africa, so it came back again from those
Mm.
traditions that came over
Mhm.
with the slaves there. The name comes from the Kikongo word for kukwa, which means to die, and was generally used as a synonym for using hoodoo or casting spells on someone. Like, basically, that's just like a word for magic, basically.
Mhm.
But goofer dust was generally used with a negative connotation, and is generally used in magic to like control or to harm someone, such as like a love spell or like a hex or a curse. Like it's more of a derogatory thing. It's meant to,
Mhm.
literally means to die. If you're using that on someone, probably a negative thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, However, the show was also correct on this use of it as well, because Goofer Dust was eventually used as a protection spell, um, meaning like using the harming nature of a Goofer Dust as like a defensive barrier on anything trying to come in. Like you
Hmm.
try to go through it, it's like you're gonna get hit with the Goofer Dust and probably die or get cursed or whatever. So
Yeah.
it was used as like a defensive thing as well.
I'm actually, like, surprised they've gotten everything kind of right so far.
That's what I'm saying. I'm very impressed with this episode. They did some good research and it worked out.
Mhm.
And I also just do like the fact that, this is, like, something I do wanna commend them for as well, that the fact that a lot of this stuff is rooted in, like African tradition, hoodoo,
Mhm.
and things like that, and that is a very, easy thing to get wrong.
Yes.
Uh, especially by, like, modern society. It's a very easy thing to get wrong, so the fact that a lot of this stuff is accurate and is, like, well researched, and I like the fact that both Sam and Dean, neither of them know anything about it, because
Mhm.
the circles that their families were in would not know really this stuff, I don't,
No, they
because they were from
wouldn't.
the north. I'm pretty sure they were from the north, right?
Mm,
I don't think they were in the south.
they were in Kansas.
Kansas is the north, right?
No, that's not.
I must be mixing it up with, like, North Dakota, like those areas.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's South. It's the state that looks like a pan.
Regardless, I
Mm,
do think that it's good that they don't know anything about it and are learning with them, like,
yeah.
learning with us about the different cultures is all.
Yeah. I
You can
I
cut
do
out the
too.
part about me talking about southern states, or leave it in and make me look like an idiot, one of the 2.
I think it's fun.
It's fine. I'm bad at geography. It's okay. I
US geography
I
specifically.
I'm good at obscure mythology and, like, folklore traditions and things like that, but I'm really bad with modern American geography.
You know what? For all I know, we could both be incorrect. I just know that Kansas is like Tornado Alley. Wizard of Oz takes place there. I think it's by Mississippi. Are you looking it up?
I'm looking it up because I want to verify so then at least we can, like, make sure that I'm an idiot. Dead. Oh, yeah. It's like it's no, you know what? We're both kind of right. It's dead center of the United States. Dead center. I mean, it's technically you're right. It's technically like it's like barely below, the border of, like, where the Ohio River is.
Okay.
So it's, like, in line with Kentucky. So, yeah, it's still
But
fairly
is it
south, but it's
next to
dead
Mississippi?
center. No.
Oh,
Oh, no, it's not. It is, surrounded by Nebraska, Missouri, Colorado, and Oklahoma, and then Texas is right underneath Oklahoma.
okay.
Yeah, Mississippi is, like, off to the right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it is the one that looks like a pan, though.
I mean, it's just a cube. Like, it's just a square.
It has a
Kansas.
handle.
No, it doesn't. That's Oklahoma.
Oh my god.
We're both bad at it. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. Okay.
All of the central US is just the same state anyway. The same, like, 3 cornfields.
Yes. And
No
desert
offense to anyone living in Kansas.
and mountain and tornadoes.
Alright.
Okay.
Back on track. Enough of our failures at, enough of the failure of the US education system where none of us remember any of what the states are or where they are or what they look like.
I I know all my state capitals. They make us learn those.
We learn the state capitals, not where they're located, not what they look like.
Yes. Okay. So back to the episode. Sam, he wants to help George. And George says when someone makes their bed, they got to lie down in it. So he's like, just leave me alone.
Yeah?
He said he asked for talent in painting, but sucks for him because no one wants to buy his paints. So he's still broke and still lonely.
Yeah, he said that he unfortunately didn't ask for fame when it comes to painting, he asked for talent. And he
Yes.
got the talent without the fame, which is, Van Gogh.
Yep. So he says his deal is not worth the price. And then he said the worst part after this deal was done, the demon stayed for a whole week chatting with people in the bar to make more deals. Like he thought he could make his deal and the demon would go away.
Yeah, so he unintentionally set this whole thing into motion.
Yeah. Besides the two people we've already seen, he said there's one more man named Hudson who he knows made a deal. So I'm like, who that he knows of, but we can just assume that there was only 4 people that made a deal. George tells Sam he absolutely does not want any help. He just wants to finish his last painting before he dies.
Mhm. Which, fair. Everyone
Yeah,
has a right to choose how they go like that.
I agree. Even if it is making a deal with the demon and you die
Yeah.
via hellhounds. Now we see a man in an office named Evan who heard dog barks from outside. And he is getting his wife to leave for the weekend to go visit her sister. And she makes a joke about how he's, like, forcing her to leave, and he's like, "Oh, just go visit her. You haven't seen her and the baby in a while." But we
Mhm.
know it's because he knows, like, this is coming.
Yeah.
And she turns around and she's like, "Oh, I just wanted to tell you something." And then when she turns back around, her face is all distorted. And that is the jump scare for me, 'cause I was not expecting that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either, but, like, again, it's like an omen that the dogs are coming, but it just seems like such a weird thing.
And now Dean and Sam are at his house. Evan shuts the door on them because he thinks they are demons,
Yeah.
which fair.
Yeah, I would think something's up too if they know about what's happening and they're like, okay, you're clearly part of it."
Yes. So Dean kicks down the door. Dean was they're running through the house and they find where Evan went and Dean was gonna go kick down that door and Sam like put his hand up to stop him and he just opened it because Evan didn't lock it.
Yeah, because I think it's an interior door. It more than likely doesn't even have a lock.
That's true. They're telling him they're trying to help him, but they're not sure if they even can. Evan says he asked the demon to save his wife from dying of cancer. And Dean, he's coming from a good place. I know he is, but he starts berating Evan for not thinking about his wife and what she wants before he made a deal.
Yeah, basically just calling him selfish for doing like, keeping her alive for himself,
Yes.
which I that one's like, I get what he's saying for sure. Because, like we said, everyone should have autonomy in terms of their body,
Mhm.
including how they die. But I don't blame him in this instance either, because I think most people would, you know, consider this deal.
Yes. And I would also, just saying, be very afraid to make the deal like this because, as we know, people die all the time of various things. So
Mhm.
he could have cured her cancer and she still could have died the next day of,
You're gonna hit by a bus, and you're like, "Well,
yes. That's like the start to that one Nicolas Cage movie. It's like the superhero or anti-hero where he's like on a motorcycle. I don't know the name of it, but that he does that with his dad. He has his dad cured of cancer, and then he, like, dies of a heart attack the next day,
yeah."
and he's like, "We made a deal," and they're like, "No, we made a deal for, like, this illness to be gone, not to keep him alive."
Mhm.
And it's like, "Yeah,
Monkey paw thing, you gotta be careful when you're making deals with things.
yes." But, his wife seems to be thriving.
And apparently that was like
So
10 years ago, so, like, pretty
yeah.
good amount of time to be happy together.
Yeah,
Live
that's
a
what
life.
Evan was saying. He was like, "If I could get 10 good years with her, that's, like, all I wanted."
Mhm.
But then Dean also goes into, like, "Did you not think about what would happen after you die and she's left alone without you?" Like, that kinda stuff.
Yeah.
But then Dean says he's going to go to the crossroads to summon the demon so he can exorcise it to buy them more time. However, I'm like, I don't know if it really works that way because the dogs are not the demon.
Yeah, but in theory, if the demons are commanding the dogs and the dogs either get if the demon goes away, then in theory, the dogs would either not have orders and, like, not really know what to do, or they would go back with them, is the thinking, which I think is a fair assumption that they'd be connected in some way.
Mm, yeah, I guess that would make
Like,
sense.
fair enough with nothing, like, when they have no
Mhm.
answers otherwise, like, this is a reasonable enough thing. If nothing else, you can get the demon there and be like, "I'm gonna exorcise you unless you break your deal and call off your dog," you
Yeah.
know?
But though, like, Evan already heard the noises, the dogs already know to go to him.
Yeah, but if the demon can command them to stop, something the demon's
Yeah.
best way to get through to anything, I think, so I think that's
Yeah,
a fair
that's true.
assumption.
Yeah, but anyway, Sam is just like, "No, you're not gonna go do that, actually."
Mhm.
And then Sam tells Dean, like, "Hey, you've been on edge ever since we found the crossroads." And he's like, "I know you've been thinking about whether or not dad made a deal." And Dean says it would make sense, but he's gonna go anyway, and Sam needs to keep Evan alive somehow,
Mhm. Good
even though
luck.
he won't be able to hear or see dogs.
Good luck.
Yes. So Dean is now at the crossroads, and he buried a box and hopefully put all the right stuff in it. Cause he
Yeah.
So these next 2, like, paragraphs I have, the these were the scenes were, like, interwoven, but I split them apart. So I'm gonna tell, like, what's happening with Dean, and then I'm gonna talk about what's happening with Sam,
Mhm.
but just know in the edit, they're like
They go back
s
and forth a
yeah, they
lot.
go back and forth.
Yeah.
So
And just with
oh,
the buried box stuff, what?
I totally forgot you had a paragraph. I was about to start reading it, and I was like, "That doesn't make any sense."
Oh. But, yeah, but Dean goes to summon the Crossroads demon. He puts a box in the ground with a picture in it, some graveyard dirt and a bone from a black cat. At least that's what they found before, so I assume he did the same thing.
Mhm.
But these ingredients all make a ton of sense. Again, based on, the folklore, because in hoodoo, the graveyard dirt is generally used in magic to do something with the dead. So, like a spell to speak with the dead or something like that, which
Mhm.
would make sense in this case because, demons from hell, you know, where dead people are. So that would make sense to me. The black cat bone is generally used as a protection charm or a lucky charm to ensure good outcome from a spell. So that also makes sense that you'd put that with this spell because you want luck and good and protection and good outcomes in this. And then the picture of yourself makes sense to some
Mhm.
level, but I also didn't find anything in particular about needing really any of these things to summon a crossroads demon specifically. Because like the picture of yourself, it makes sense because it may spells in general, the way like the belief around spells work, the more personal the spell is, in the sense of if you have like the whole like trope of, oh, you gave the witch got a hair and now they can cast a curse on you, things like that.
Mhm.
If you have something of the person, it makes it more potent. So and or more accurate to getting that person with the spell or affecting them with that spell. So
Yeah.
using a picture in this spell would make sense because it means like, hey, this is who's calling. It's basically a caller ID to the demon, being like,
Mhm.
this is who we're talking about, or this is who is
Yeah.
calling you. So it can help like ensure that they come to the right place. Um, so yeah, all that makes sense. So in this case, they're using the bone to protect themselves and try to get a favorable outcome, while the graveyard dirt to summon a thing from hell from the dead. And then the picture is basically saying who it is that would like to speak to the demon.
Mhm.
So all of it makes sense in terms of spell work here, but I wasn't able to find anything about this is how you summon a crossroads demon. A lot of the mythology around crossroads, it was like you just go to a crossroads after like a certain time, like usually like the witching hour, like after midnight, 3 a.m., something like that. And then you'll meet a strange figure, and then they'll, you know, talk to you in a weird way. Like they're a
Mhm.
very cryptic figure that'll do this deal with you. And it's said to be like the devil.
Yeah.
So usually it just, like, comes and then, like, one of the traditions is you have to go there repeatedly, like, 3 days in a row or something like that,
Okay.
and then they'll, like, get your attention. You'll get their attention, but there's nothing like, "Oh, you need to do all this stuff to summon them," but it all makes sense in terms of spell work, so
Mhm. And this show in general, for their lore, they like using pictures of people. We saw it maybe 2 or 3 times in season 1 as
yeah.
well. Like, when there's an altar or magic space, they like putting pictures of people in
Yeah,
it.
it's a very easy thing for, like, a visual medium like
Yeah.
TV to, like, show who they're talking about and who they're targeting, which I like as that form, but also,
Mhm.
again, in Magic, it makes sense because that's a very commonly used thing in Magic. If you got a picture of a thing, then it helps amplify the magic on the thing,
Mhm.
in theory, right? So
Yeah, for sure. So after Dean buries the box, we see a demon. And it's interesting how the Crossroad demons have red eyes. I've noticed that throughout this whole episode when they show them.
mhm.
She is very charismatic and she knows everything about Dean. And he's like, "Hey, let's go sit in my car." And she agrees. And I'm like, I don't really know why, but she does. So they're going and going. And Dean says he wants Evan released from his contract for his soul. And then she says, "Giving your life for someone else like father, like son." And then she talks about how John made a deal, but it wasn't with her. And he's trying to distract her to get her in the car. But
Mhm.
sadly, she sees the devil's trap on the ground
Mhm.
and she gets mad and she's like, "I'm not getting in the car at all, actually." And
Mhm.
I'm like gonna double kill Evan now, or she doesn't
Yeah.
say that, but that's kind of the vibe.
Yeah, she's, like, immediately like, "Alright, this is the trap, like, you're being a dick."
Yes. And she said she could have brought John back to life. And then she's like, "But seeing you miserable is better," and
Yeah.
starts to walk away. And of course, Dean says, "Hold on," and asks if she can really bring him back.
Mhm.
And she's like, "Yeah," and John would live a full natural life, which is where I got back to like the cancer, getting rid of the cancer thing. It's like, okay, but what
Mhm.
is a full natural life
Yeah, what does
actually?
that mean? He's already, like, what, 50?
Yeah. And she said she can give Dean 10 years to live. So she says the terms right here.
Mhm.
And during this conversation, Dean walks her under another trap he made under like a water tower
Mhm.
or some kind of tower. I don't know.
Yeah, just some, like, it's like a little, like, off the road kind of, like,
Mhm.
gazebo.
Yeah. When which Dean said he would release her from the trap if she lets Evan go. And she said she can't break a binding contract valid. Evan did ask for it, like, and
Mhm.
signed it, and then Dean just starts exorcising her, and
Yeah.
during the exorcism, she tells Dean to wait, and then she kisses him, sealing the deal for Evan to have a long life,
Mhm.
which kinda scared me for a second for Dean because I was like, "What deal is she sealing here?" Because he kinda offered up 2 of them.
He didn't offer up the other deal.
He at first, he said, "Clear Evan for my soul," and then he said, "I'll let you go if you get rid of Evan." So it
Yeah.
was kind of 2, but it's
Yeah, that's fair.
from context clues, it was her letting her go for breaking his contract.
Yeah.
Now back to Sam. He's emptied all the goofer dust around the room. Evan can hear the dogs. Sam's telling him to stay in the circle. He made a circle of goofer dust as well.
Mhm.
The dogs were trying to break down the door, but they suddenly stop. And then we hear them in the vents and they break through, and the dogs are getting closer and closer to the circle. Like they can see the breathing on the circle. And as Dean is exercising the demon, the dogs are getting closer and closer, and they actually end up breaking it just from like
Mhm.
sniffing it and stuff.
Mhm.
So Sam takes Evan into another room, and the dogs were banging on the door, but they stopped because of the deal being made,
Mhm.
like just in time.
Yep.
And the demon tells Dean he would never pull this stunt if he knew where his dad was,
Mhm.
which was going to make Dean finish the exorcism anyway. But the demon leaves the body, so now Dean is left with a confused girl on the ground.
Mhm.
Now in the car again, Sam says demons lie all of the time, so she could have just been lying about where dad is and what he did. And Dean
Mhm.
says they know that's not true.
Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah. His legacy was supposed to be him going out fighting, and Sam says because of what John did, so many other people have lived because him and Dean keep saving people.
Mhm.
And then he asked Dean if he actually really considered making that deal, and the episode ends.
Yeah, it leaves it on a silence too, like, where Dean's, like, not saying anything, like, then, like, starts driving off, and it's like, we know that he was.
Yeah.
He was considering it.
Mhm. So for our crime counter, this one's actually really easy. There wasn't any.
Yeah, not that we could identify. So if you guys have seen any crimes in this episode, also leave that in the comments because this one was pretty straightforward. I guess the closest thing was like kicking the guy's door down,
Uh,
technically,
I don't
like
think
break.
Evan cares anymore.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like technically, like B&E, but like,
And then, like, I know we talked about the pretending to be a journalist, and we've gone over this before, how, like, it can be illegal to pretend to gain somebody's trust for something, but, like, they it seemed like the guy they talked to didn't really, like they weren't really interviewing him for a
and
lot of.
also being a journalist is a lot looser thing
Yeah,
than like being like, oh, I'm a cop.
yes. When you say you're a journalist, I mean, you could show your credentials, but people don't ask for them,
Yeah,
like your press badge or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So, yeah, there weren't any crimes this episode. So now let's get into our episode ratings. They actually differ this time, but not by
Mhm.
much. So for story and pacing, we both gave it a 4. I really liked this story and it paced out very well to me.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. Like, I thought it was paced out really well, it was very entertaining, I didn't feel, like, bored any time watching it, like, I like the cuts back and forth a lot between the dynamic scenes, like, it was really good.
Mhm. For monster lore, I gave it a 3, and like I said, it's because I rate this off of, like, just the value of what I watched, and from what you watch, they don't really explain a lot, they just give you a lot of, like they do a lot of setup, like, "Oh, we have black dogs. Oh, we have the yellow flowers. We have goofer dust." Like, they say they have stuff, they don't really, like, go into it a lot.
Yeah, a lot of the lore is from me explaining the lore.
Mhm.
and why it makes sense. But yeah, I gave it a 4 because I know all of the stuff, so it like hit different for me. Where I was just like, oh, that's cool. I like that. Like
Mhm.
even just like watching it for the first time, so I give it a little bit extra bump for how like accurate they were. I didn't give it a full 5 because they've recently done Death Omens,
Mhm.
and like they've done like again they've done it similar things lately, and they didn't really explain it a ton in the episode. So I can
Yeah.
understand why people would give it lower. That's why I bumped it down a notch because in the episode itself, they didn't explain why all this stuff was like
Mhm.
super relevant or made sense or a lot. They touched on it, but not enough for my to give it a 5.
Yeah, agreed.
I think a solid 4 is good.
For character development, I gave it a 2, and that is because there was a little, but really the turning point of it was Dean's getting confirmation, but it really wasn't, like, full development either.
Yeah. I gave it a 3 because I think it's, like, basically the exact same thing. I just was a little more generous with it, I guess, in my initial reading of it, where I was just like, "Oh, it's like a step in the like, we're developing this story of, like, this, like, survivor's guilt, basically."
Mhm. That
And,
makes
like,
sense.
and, like, him having to, like he coulda made a deal right then and there, and, like, that this is a very recurring theme throughout the whole series of them, like they could do these things that would be, like, better for them personally, but, like ethical issues, And I think that the ethical issue was fun, so I gave it a little extra.
Mhm. Makes sense. Alright. Visuals and direction, we both gave it a 3. Um,
Okay.
the visuals and camera direction wasn't bad, it's just we've seen better work.
And also the weird zoom ins on the door.
Yes. For emotional impact, we both gave it a 3. It's kind of the same as the last one, like, we've seen more emotions, but we've definitely seen less emotions.
Yeah, it's right bang in the middle. It's very average, or it's like I felt some things, but not the most things.
Yes. Rewatchability, we both gave it a 3. It's like a, "Yeah, I guess."
Yeah, it's a good episode. It's solid. It's fun. It's just not the most consequential, and like I think that there was like I don't know. It just feels like we could have done some more for me
Yeah.
to make me want to rewatch it actively. But otherwise, it's just like this is fine. Good spec like spank in the middle,
Yeah,
smack in the middle,
I agree.
whatever.
Salt and Sass, we both gave it a 4,
Yeah.
and it's just the little banter they had was good.
Yeah, the banter things with, like, Dean specifically too are they're very entertaining and made me laugh a couple times, so that's why I gave it a 4. I was like, "It's pretty funny." It's a pretty fun one.
My average here is a 3.14 out of 5,
And mine's a 3.43 out of 5.
making our combined score a 3.29 out
Yeah,
of 5.
so pretty good. Above average. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. If you guys agree with our scores, disagree with our scores, whatever you feel,
Mm.
let us know. Alrighty, well, then that brings us to the end of Season 2, Episode 8, Crossroad Blues. Thank you for joining us this week, where we learn more about demons and the way they do business. Next time, we find out in our mid season finale that it's not just demons that can possess people, but also viruses. Fun.
Ooh.
So, whenever you're ready, we'll see you in the archive.